for the big news around the International Monetary Fund, which of course released a new on how much impact digital payments is making across Africa. That story around innovation came as the Africa's Perspective released this latest video from the International Monetary Fund's Africa Department. So let's take a listen to the head of that department, Abebe Emre Salase, who's also sitting down to this conversation with the head of the South Africa's Reserve Bank, Leseja Kengiango. Let's take a listen to them.
I see in our continent a fair degree of conservatism in terms of how people think about the whole fintech sector, payment systems in particular. Can I ask you, what are the potential risks in the introduction of digital payment systems, and how can these risks be mitigated to allow faster adoption?
I'm not sure I agree with you that there's been conservatism in our continent in terms of moving digital. I think that we have moved very fast. And the reason we had moved very fast was because the old model or the model that prevailed in the advanced economies was not quite the risk. I prefer to emphasize firstly the benefits, and then I will see how we deal with the risks. Firstly, I think that, as I had stated, we will give the users of financial services access to cheap, fast products, and I think that becomes important. But what has been happening is also that as we move digital, so does crime. Crime also goes cyber. So the risk of cyber becomes more elevated, and it becomes even more important for the authorities and for the policymakers to actually make these payment systems even safer. As central banks, we provide the guardrails. We have payments. We provide the settlement infrastructure. And it is very important that the retail part of these fast payment systems is located where it correctly should be in the private sector. And as we talk about the introduction of CBDC, we must be asking ourselves where the split starts and ends. And it becomes important when we look at the CBDC and we say, we would be providing wholesale CBDC. And I think that I can see the business case for a wholesale CBDC. I'm not sure how practical it is when we go retail. And when we go retail, for me, that is where the private sector should actually be coming in. And so you have got wholesale money, which is driven by the central bank, and the banks continuing, or the private sector continuing to play its role in providing these retail services, whether they are tokenizing deposits or any of those things to make the payments faster. As South Africa, we had also then decided that we would be spending more time talking about faster payment systems rather than spending too much energy on the CBDC, although we have also given ourselves the scope to be a very fast follower should the model work. And my last point that people raise as a risk is that of anti-money laundering and the financing of terrorism, that you have got these things fast and it could happen faster. But in my mind, this risk is actually overemphasized. And one of the BIS innovation hubs actually showed that we could actually be using technology to make KYC much simpler, much easier, and that we could actually mitigate the money laundering risks within the fast payment systems.
Thank you, Lesacha. That's very clear, very helpful. Earlier you mentioned about the role that digital payments can play in allowing the government to transfer resources to people, avoid the queues, as you put it. Is there a way in which the public sector can, lead to greater adoption of digital payment systems by, for example, requiring taxes to be paid through that means, or other things that the government could do to accelerate digital payment systems adoption?
A couple of things. Firstly, is that I think that enablement and incentives work better than mandatory stuff. And so tax collection, for example, in South Africa is a no-brainer. Tax gets deducted directly through payroll and all of that. And the South African Revenue Services have got an e-filing system, and you can file these things. That also almost in many respects gotten rid of the need for tax returns. The digitization of SARS meant that the revenue service can almost like pre-populate for you using data from the financial sector, from banks, from insurers, and from employers. They can pre-populate these things for you, almost like just say, there it is, and in many respects, before you even know it, the revenue service will say, there, your money in the bank, we have pre-assessed, tell us if you agree. So that is done, and it didn't get done by mandating these things. It gave the taxpayers a particular experience, and thus taxpayers embraced that. And so thus it comes that when it comes to the government providing services, government cannot and should not say to people, I will only do this if you move digital, but should actually enhance the citizens' experience through the technology, and that would make a difference. The one point that we didn't touch on is that we're talking about all this digital stuff and the fast payments, and yet in many respects, when you ask authorities about identification, we still have to carry some physical identification. And I think that one of the things that we in our payment ecosystem modernization is to go for a digital identification that incorporates biometrics and so forth, and that makes it actually even safer than a physical document, and it's a very important enabler in the payment space.
Thank you, Lesacha. Just one last question, and I know you've been trying to champion the use of the facilitation of greater cross-border systems, payments, starting with SADC, but also in the rest of the continent. If you could say a little bit about how digital payment systems can support cross-border payments and trade in sub-Saharan Africa. There's a gaping hole in this area, as you well know.
In SADC, for example, we had found that 90% of the transactions across the borders for individuals are actually below $100. 90% are below $100. That is what people are moving. Bringing down the cost thereof will make a significant impact in the quality of lives of people.